My brother spun a story about me leaving our sick father while he did everything. When I showed up with evidence, bank records, missed appointments, and vacation pics, his hero act collapsed in front of everyone in seconds. The first time someone asked me that question, where were you while he was dying? It came from my Aunt Nancy. We were at a family cookout. Someone had brought over a tray of store-bought brownies and I was setting them on the table when she leaned in, looked me right in the eye, and said it like an accusation wrapped in concern. I froze. Because in that moment I realized they didn't know. Worse, they thought they did. 6 months earlier, I'd moved out of town for work. It wasn't a glamorous job. Contract management for a tech firm. But it paid well and it allowed me to finally get out from under the financial mess that had been building since Mom passed. Dad had been getting sicker for a while, congestive heart failure, diabetes, an old back injury that made walking painful, but when I told my brother Marcus I was thinking of declining the job to stay closer, he waved it off. I've got him, he said. Take the job. I'll hold down the fort. I didn't hesitate. I believed him. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was thinking family would see the whole picture. Because while I was in Denver working 12-hour days, sending money every 2 weeks to help cover Dad's meds, and calling the pharmacy from my lunch breaks to make sure prescriptions were being filled, Marcus was painting a very different story back home. And I didn't realize how deep it had gone until Aunt Nancy hit me with that line. You didn't even come back when he went into the hospital, she added, softly, like she was giving me a chance to redeem myself. I paid for that hospital, I said. It came out sharper than I intended. She frowned. Marcus had told everyone I disappeared. That I abandoned Dad during the hardest chapter of his life. That he, Marcus, stepped up while I ran off. It was a good story. Clean. Easy to tell. Easy to hear. And completely false. The first real red flag came 2 months after I moved. Dad called me himself. His voice was quiet, like he didn't want anyone to hear. Thanks for the groceries, he said. I hadn't sent groceries. I'd sent money for groceries. I thought Marcus said he'd do the order? I asked. A pause. He said he forgot. That was all. I brushed it off. One mistake. No big deal. But then it happened again. And again. I'd wire money for medication and the pharmacy would call me saying nothing had been picked up. I'd schedule a home nurse visit and the nurse would text me that no one answered the door. When I asked Marcus, he always had a reason. Miscommunication. Dad said he was fine. I was out of town, chill. The excuses piled up like unopened mail. I kept paying. Kept calling. Kept assuming the problem was disorganization, not dishonesty. Until I came home for that weekend visit and got hit with the full weight of what he'd done. It wasn't just Nancy. It was everyone. My cousins, uncles, neighbors all giving me that same look. That you didn't show up look. I heard phrases I didn't recognize attached to my name. Checked out. Selfish. Let Marcus carry the load. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stayed quiet. And I watched. Marcus was glowing in it. Walking around the backyard like a man wearing a cape no one could see. Yeah, it's been tough, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Dad needs round-the-clock help. It's been draining, but you do what you have to for family, right? They clapped him on the back. Called him the good son. And he looked at me when he said it. That was the moment I understood. He wasn't just letting people believe I abandoned Dad. He made sure they did. When I confronted him later that night, he didn't deny it. He smiled. You weren't here. I was paying for everything. And no one saw it. I stared at him. Is that what matters to you? The credit. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded. You've always been the golden child, man. The one who went to college. The one with the big words and the clean job. Let me have this one. This one. I said. He shrugged. Everyone thinks I'm the one holding things together. Why ruin that? I opened my mouth. Closed it. Because anything I said now would sound like begging. I left the next morning without saying goodbye. Sat in my car in the driveway for 15 minutes just breathing. And then I made a decision. I wouldn't argue. I'd prove it. When I got back to Denver, I started gathering everything. Bank statements. Payment records. Email receipts. Call logs with doctors and care coordinators. Anything with a timestamp and my name on it. Then I started making notes. Quietly. Carefully. Dates when Marcus was supposedly at the hospital cross-checked with his Instagram posts from the golf course. Weeks he claimed he stayed overnight matched against his GPS-tagged photos from a guy's trip in Palm Springs. He didn't hide it. He just didn't think I'd look. I said nothing to the family. Not even to Dad, who, in his growing confusion, probably didn't know who was doing what anymore. I waited. Until the next time I was invited to Sunday dinner. And I RSVP'd yes. I didn't tell anyone I was coming to Sunday dinner. That was important. Because if Marcus knew, he'd find a way to spin it. To prepare the script. Maybe even guilt me into not showing up at all. That was his style, control the scene before the audience ever arrived. But I didn't give him the chance. I parked 2 blocks away. Walked the rest. Folder under my arm. Phone fully charged. Emails sorted. Screenshots labeled. 6 months of silence. 6 months of being painted as the villain. That night, I was done being quiet. The week before, I had gathered the last of what I needed. I didn't just want to defend myself. I wanted the full picture. I pulled 6 pharmacy invoices, all paid from my personal account. 8 wire transfers for hospital bills. 2 voicemails from Dad's primary care doctor thanking me directly. A letter from the nursing service confirming I had scheduled and paid for Dad's in-home aid. But the real gold? The vacation photos. Marcus had posted them all. Tagged. Geotagged. Dated. Vegas in February. Cabo in March. Some luxury golf resort in April. His captions always the same: work hard, play harder, or earn this. The man was broadcasting lies and leisure while the rest of us believed he was sitting at Dad's bedside. He didn't think anyone would cross-reference timestamps. He didn't think anyone would challenge his version. He counted on silence. The day before the dinner, I called Dad. I didn't bring up the dinner or Marcus or anything heavy. I just asked him how he was feeling. His voice was slow. Weaker than the last time I called. But clear enough. He said Marcus had been busy lately. Said he'd missed a couple of appointments. Said the nurse hadn't been by in a while. Then, almost absently, he added, "I miss your voice around here." I held that sentence like a match in the dark. When I walked up the front steps to our childhood home, everything looked the same: cracked bricks, crooked railing, porch light always half broken. Inside, voices floated through the walls, laughter, plates clinking, casual storytelling. I opened the door. It went silent for 2 full seconds. Then, well, look who it is. Marcus, smiling like a politician. He walked over and clapped me on the back like we'd been on good terms this whole time. "Didn't think you'd make it," he said, eyes narrow. "I know," I replied. He led me into the dining room like a host bringing out a surprise guest. Everyone looked up, half pleased, half stunned. My Aunt Nancy smiled like she'd manifested me with guilt. My father looked tired, but glad. Marcus poured me a drink. "Just in time for the toast," he said. He raised his glass. "To Dad and to family stepping up when it matters." A few people clapped. My jaw tensed. But I didn't say a word. Not yet. Dinner was a blur of clinking forks, fake laughter, and stories I wasn't part of. Marcus controlled the conversation like he always did, charming, self-deprecating, the golden boy everyone thought they knew. He recounted how rough it had been. How he barely slept some nights. How hard it was managing Dad's meds, appointments, emotions. I watched him perform. Watched people nod. Watched him bathe in attention that didn't belong to him. And when the dishes were cleared and the room softened into post-meal chat, I stood, pulled the folder from my bag, and laid it on the table. Before dessert, I said, "I want to share something." Marcus raised an eyebrow. I opened the folder and began. "This is the invoice for Dad's first hospital stay this year. Paid in full by me." I slid the document across the table. "This is the email from the nursing service confirming I set up all 8 visits." Another slide. "These are screenshots of Marcus in Vegas, Cabo, and Arizona posted during the same weeks he told you he was sitting in Dad's hospital room." I paused. Turned to my aunt. "Remember when you said I didn't care? That I abandoned him?" She blinked. I placed the call log in front of her. "These are my check-ins with Dad's doctors. Weekly. Sometimes daily." I looked at Marcus. He wasn't smiling now. He tried to speak. I cut him off. "This isn't about revenge," I said. "This is about the truth. I stayed quiet while you told a story about me that wasn't real. While you let everyone believe I walked away." I turned to the room. "I didn't. I was just doing it from a distance. Because that's what Dad asked for. Because you," I looked at Marcus again, "said you'd be here. And instead, you made yourself the star." No one spoke. Even the ticking wall clock sounded louder. Marcus stared at the folder like it might bite him. Someone, I think it was our cousin Louis, stood up and left the table. Another aunt looked down at her plate, cheeks flushed. "My father?" He closed his eyes. Then opened them. And said slowly, "I didn't know. That was all. But it was enough. I didn't stay for dessert. Didn't wait for apologies or damage control. I stood, tucked the folder under my arm, and walked out the same door I came in. Marcus didn't follow me. No one did. I didn't expect applause. But I also didn't expect the silence to be so loud. When I left the house that night, the folder still warm from the heat of the table, I could feel their stares sticking to my back like static. No one chased me down the driveway. No one called my name. They just let me go. And that told me everything. For the first time in months I slept. Not perfectly. Not dreamless. But uninterrupted. I woke up before my alarm, sat on the edge of the bed and just breathed. The weight in my chest had shifted. It wasn't gone, but it was finally mine again, not something Marcus had twisted and handed to me with a fake smile. And I knew then. I didn't need to be believed. I just needed to stop pretending I didn't see what they were doing. The next morning, I got a text from my cousin Louis. I didn't know. I'm sorry. Simple. Direct. Real. That one I answered. Thanks. He didn't follow up. He didn't try to explain. He just left it there, and that meant more than all the years of fake politeness. From everyone else? Nothing. No texts. No calls. Not even a vague post on Facebook. Which honestly was a relief. I wasn't looking for redemption. I was done performing for an audience that didn't want the truth. Later that week, my dad called. His voice was thinner than usual, like he'd been chewing on words and finally decided to spit one out. You left early, he said. Yeah. Pause. What you said, it was a lot. I know. Another pause. Then he cleared his throat. I don't know what Marcus told people, but I never asked him to carry all of it. I didn't ask anyone to. I nodded even though he couldn't see it. I know, I said again. And then the one sentence I didn't expect. I should have said something sooner. I don't think my dad ever really knew how much Marcus had been lying. And part of me wonders if he avoided asking because he didn't want to choose between us. But that moment, him acknowledging that silence his weight, was more than I thought I'd ever get. I didn't need a grand apology. I just needed him to see me. The next Sunday, I didn't go to dinner. And the Sunday after that, I wasn't invited. I didn't take it personally. I think they were embarrassed. Or maybe just unsure of what to do now that the reliable one had walked off script. Marcus didn't reach out. Not once. No text. No passive-aggressive meme. No, just checking in. Which was fine. Because I realized I didn't want anything from him. I didn't want an apology that only came because he got caught. I didn't want a fake reconciliation where we both pretend to move on without ever saying the hard part out loud. I didn't even want to argue. I just wanted peace. And for the first time in a long time, I had it. I moved Dad's prescriptions to a more reliable delivery system. Hired a new nurse, one who copied me on all updates automatically. I still paid for everything. But now I didn't do it quietly. I send invoices. Confirmations. Paper trails. I stopped hiding the work just because it felt like no one cared to see it. Now, if they looked away, that was on them. One night, a few weeks later, my mom called. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. Her voice was tired. Not angry, just brittle. We haven't seen you. I know. Silence. Your father said you've been helping more than we realized. I didn't say anything. She went on. I guess, maybe we didn't ask enough questions. Still, I said nothing. Because this wasn't the moment for, it's okay. This wasn't the part where I smoothed it over and made it easy again. Finally, she added. I hope you'll come back around. I exhaled. I might, I said. But in my head, I finished the sentence. If I'm treated like someone whose time and name matter. The house didn't feel heavy anymore. It used to feel like a battleground, like every conversation was another chance for Marcus to throw a narrative at me and hope it stuck. But now? It felt quiet. Like standing in the wreckage of something that never really supported you in the first place. It didn't hurt. It just didn't feel like home anymore. I started building a new rhythm. Dinner with friends. Weekly calls with Dad. Time for myself. No fake check-ins. No forced closeness. Just real people, real connection, real rest. I stopped showing up out of guilt, and the world didn't fall apart. Some people slowly trickled back into my life, cousins who apologized, uncles who admitted they should have known better, neighbors who offered awkward words of support. I didn't hold grudges, but I didn't hand out clean slates either. People don't get to break you and then demand the version of you that still bends. I never went back to that table. The one where Marcus gave his toast. The one where everyone nodded and called him a hero. The one where I was invisible until I wasn't. I left that place behind. And I let it stay behind. Because here's what I learned. You don't need to win the crowd to reclaim your name. You just need to stop letting other people write the story. And once you do, the silence they leave behind doesn't feel empty. It feels earned. It's been a few months since the night I laid everything on the table. No one talks about it. Not because they forgot. Because they don't know how to bring it up without reliving it. And I don't offer a bridge back to where we were. Some things don't need repairing. They need releasing. Dad's health has gotten worse. He's slower. Thinner. He repeats stories more often. But he still remembers my name. He still asks how my job's going. Still calls me when a letter comes in the mail that he doesn't understand. Still thanks me every time for the prescriptions, the nurse visits, the rides to appointments. He knows. Even if he can't always say it clearly, he knows. Marcus hasn't called. Not once. He hasn't apologized. Hasn't clarified. Hasn't even tried to play the "it was a misunderstanding" card. Which means he knows too. And honestly, I'm fine with the silence. Mom sent a Christmas card. Generic. Pre-printed message. Just our names. No handwritten note. No, thinking of you. No, let's talk. Just the family in bold red script. I didn't send one back. Some people still hover around the edge of it, trying to gently sweep things under the rug. An uncle who called to check in, then slipped in. I hope you boys can get past this. Life's too short. A cousin who texted. I don't know what happened, but it's not worth staying mad. But here's the thing. I'm not mad. I'm done. There's a difference. I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped crossing ones that only went one way. I still help Dad. Still cover what I can. Still show up when he needs something. But now I do it without asking permission. Without hoping anyone else will notice. Without folding myself small so others can feel bigger. What I do now. It's mine. Not a performance. Not a debt. Just mine. A few weeks ago, I ran into Marcus at the pharmacy. We locked eyes across the waiting area. He hesitated, then looked down at his phone like nothing had happened. I didn't approach him. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not in size. In presence. Like the stage had collapsed and he didn't know how to stand without the spotlight. When I got home that night, I opened a drawer in my desk and pulled out the folder. The one with all the documents. The screenshots. The receipts. The truth. I flipped through it one last time. Not to relive it. Just to acknowledge it. Then I put it through the shredder. Every page. Gone. Because I don't need proof anymore. I have peace. Closure doesn't come with apologies. Sometimes it comes when you stop looking for them. The house feels different now. Dad's place. Not filled with guilt or shadows or forced meals where everyone waits for someone to crack. Just space. Simple, imperfect space. Where he talks about old cars and forgets what day it is and sometimes tells me he's proud even when he's not sure what for. I take it all. Because it's real. I don't miss the family gatherings. Don't miss the fake smiles. Don't miss the quiet expectations that I'll make things easier for everyone else. What I do miss. Myself. The version of me before all this. The one who thought being quiet was noble. That being the strong one meant carrying everyone else's weight. I'm learning to unlearn that version. One day at a time. Now, when I think about what happened, I don't play it on loop. I just remember how it felt to walk out of that house and breathe like the air was finally mine again. I didn't win. There was no victory speech. No trophy. But I walked away with my name intact. And that's more than enough. Sometimes the loudest thing you can say is nothing at all. Sometimes standing up for yourself looks like walking out the door, not slamming it. And sometimes, peace sounds like no one telling your story but you.